Max, I want to say thank you. Oh, there he is. Ready? Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. Welcome back to those of you who are rejoining us, and welcome to the community members that have just gotten here. This is the Birmingham Public Schools School Board meeting, and again, my name is Kim Whitman, and I am the president for the 2018-2019 school year. We are welcoming this evening Dr. Matthew Outlaw to join us. As you all know, we are going through our superintendent search, and so Dr. Outlaw has graciously accepted to come in and go through the interview process. But before we do that, I do want to say thank you to Scott Worrell and the BEA for supplying dinner. You have a room full of very happy, full people, so thank you. And Dr. Outlaw, we will give you a piece of pizza at the end, we promise.
I appreciate it.
So before we get started, I'd like the trustees just to give a brief introduction of themselves for Dr. Outlaw, please. Brian, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Doctor, for being here today. Brian Jennings, I've been on the board for 2 years. I have 4 children that have, 2 are in college now, but have gone through Birmingham schools, and I have twins that are in 10th grade right now at Seaholm.
Hi, my name is Jessica Thomas. I've been on the board for 4 years. My term is ending shortly. I have a daughter that has gone through the district and been in the community for several years as well.
Hi, Dr. Outlaw, and welcome. My name is Lori Ajluni. I am in the end of my 2nd year as a board trustee. I have been an educator for Birmingham for 31 years, and I didn't think I should give up the role of an educator, so here I am as a trustee. So thanks for coming. Looking forward to this.
And again, welcome, Dr. Outlaw. Kim Whitman. I have 2 children in the district, one in high school, one in middle school at Berkshire. Similar to Brian, Lori, and you'll hear from Adrian, this is my 2nd year in the term, and I have 4 more years to go. So again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Adrian Young. I'm the mom of 2, a 9-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. Neither are currently enrolled in the district. And like Kim said, I was elected in 2016. I have a 6-year term, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you.
Hi, Walter Rothschild, 4 years on the board. My term is coming to an end shortly, and I'll be transitioning off. And I have 3 children. Each have graduated from the district. My youngest graduated last June from Seaholm, and all 3 of them in college at this point. Very expensive.
Understand that.
Dr. Outlaw, Steve Scheit, welcome to Birmingham. Great to have you.
Thank you.
My wife and I have 3 children that graduated through the Birmingham Public Schools, all launched, all successful, very happy. No longer expensive. Light at the end of the tunnel.
I doubt that.
Cell phone plans don't count as being 8 years on the board, and with Walter and Jessica leaving the board December 31st. Great to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Outlaw, if you don't mind, we'll start with you just giving an opening statement.
Sure, absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me here. I know it's been a busy week, crazy week, and so I just really appreciate you having me here and having a chance to talk about the school district. My name is Matt Outlaw. This is my 23rd year in education. I've had 18 as a school or a district leader, and I have had 5 as a superintendent, and 13 of my leadership years are in like districts in Novi and in the Grosse Pointe School District. You have my resume, so I'm not going to walk through and waste your time on that, but just a couple quick things about me that may be of interest. One is that I strive for excellence in everything I do, and I've done that since I was a kid, whether it's playing basketball or golf or doing my job. Everything I do, if I do it, I don't do anything halfway. I go all in whenever I do something. I'm a passionate learner, love to learn. I love school. That was a great part of it, but I've always been a sponge in my career for learning from others, learning from experiences, watching how other leaders have handled situations. And I think that has really helped me a lot as I've gone through my career. And I've had incredible mentors every step of the way that have been just amazing for me. So thankful for them. And then the last thing I would say is that the thing that drew me to education was my absolute passion for what we do. Early on, I think a lot of teachers, they're idealistic, and they're going to come in and they're going to save the world, and I was one of those people. But every step that I've gone along the way, I think that my understanding of how important this job is has grown. And after 5 years of being a superintendent, I understand we make a difference, not just in the lives of the children, but in their families. We make a difference in the lives of staff. We can make a difference in the lives of the family of staff. And if we do a great job as a superintendent and as a board, we can make a difference in the entire community. And I've learned more and more about that every step along the way, and that's something that drives me. It's a motivator for me. I come to work every day. I'm in business because we need to be in business because the kids depend on us. So that's just a little bit about me there. Personally, I've been married for 15 years. My beautiful wife, Nicole, she's a Spanish teacher in the Pinckney School District. Have two children. My son Tyler is 11. My daughter Hannah is 9, and they're amazing children. I'm just so blessed to have them. I'm extremely excited about being here. Having worked in a like school and having been part of collaborating and been part of so many meetings where Grosse Pointe and Novi collaborated with the Birmingham School, I've always respected this school district so much. And this isn't just another school district to me. I've got family and friends here. My little niece, Savannah, she's going to be at Pierce Elementary School in a couple of years. It's meaningful to me. My friend was a part owner of a bagel shop over on Lincoln, helped him launch that business back when I was in my 20s. My wife and I were married over at the Birmingham Methodist Church, so we've got some connections here, and this is, I'm just really excited to be here, and just thank you so much for having me. So, thank
Great.
you.
Well,
Thank
welcome
you.
again.
Thank you.
Steve, do you like to start, kick
Well,
off
you
the
men-
questions?
you mentioned golf, so they say if you play a round of golf with a person, you learn a lot about their character. If we went out and golfed together, what would I learn about Matt Outlaw after a round of golf?
Well, you would learn that I'm a very average golfer. I think,
I'll give you an easier question.
honestly, I think it's a great question because it does, I always say that playing, for me, I always talk about basketball. You know, basketball is one that I always talk about. That tells you a lot about a person. I think you'd find that I'm tenacious, that I'm cordial, that I'm respectful, that I cheer for everybody else, but I work harder than everybody else. And that's, we're talking the sport metaphor here. I work hard. I take what I do seriously. I don't interrupt other people in their game. I cheer them on. That's
But
how I play
not in my
sport.
backswing. You wouldn't be cheering me on my backswing.
Not in your backswing, in my
Just
head.
to
I
be
would be
clear.
very quiet, so.
All right, let's start with the curriculum.
Yeah.
It's a big part of what we do. If you could, help us understand how you would go about assessing, Dr. Outlaw, what we currently do, the effectiveness and the results of our current curriculum, and then secondly, a little bit about your philosophy, your thoughts about what makes for great curriculum design, and maybe mention the roles of the different stakeholders, either in the assessment or in the design portion of that.
Sure. Just to start off with, what would I do as a new person here? Listen and learn, observe. I would want to be able to do tours with buildings, walk with principals, listen to them. They've already been doing this. They've been in the schools, they've been in the classrooms. Listen, learn, observe, talk to teachers, see what their struggles are, what's going really well. So it would be a lot of just communication. That's how I would start the process. What I'd want to also do is I'd want to see what kind of feedback you've gotten from families, from graduates, and have a chance to kind of dissect that and see what staff has to say about some of that feedback. I want to look at what the district has been doing with the strategic plan in that area and be able to assess. So those are some of the things that I would do as a new person to the game. For me, when it comes to curriculum is what you're supposed to teach. Instruction is how you do it, and are you effective at it? That's the big one. Instruction is the hard part. Curriculum, I think the key piece with the curriculum is that it's relevant to the students, that it's rigorous for the students, and that it's aligned with what the state expectations are. So those are the things that I would really focus in on. The relevance area is one that I think we fall down on oftentimes, where students don't see how what they're doing on a daily basis connects with what their futures are going to be. So if we find ways to build those connections between what the students are doing and their future or things that they're interested in, I think that you're off to a great start.
And who needs to be involved? What are the different players that would be involved?
Curriculum is an all-hands-on-deck topic. The teachers are key people. They're there every single day. They have to be part of doing that work. You have your instructional specialist, you have your curriculum department. All of those people need to be at the table, part of that process. The other part of it, and I mentioned it through surveys and whatnot, is we forget about the kids and we forget about the parents oftentimes. So we have to take that feedback as part of that. When we do curriculum reviews, we always have parents that are part of that. And that parent voice of what it's like from all the different vantage points, I would say they all have to be there to do it right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Matt, again, thanks for coming in. I'd like to ask you a little bit about strategic plan. I'll make the assumption that you've taken a look at the Birmingham strategic plan. It's coming to term in the end of the year. And could you speak a little bit about the methodology that you would envision using to develop a forward-looking strategic plan, a new plan? Maybe talk a little bit about what you saw in our existing plan that's coming to conclusion, and perhaps touch on what you would see as categories or components of a strategic plan that would be mandatory, not necessarily specific items, but what you think it should address, and possibly even touching on how you measure the success or the accomplishment of a plan at some point.
So I've had different experiences working with strategic plans. When I was in Grosse Pointe, I was part of strategic planning, where we had outside consultants came in, and it was a very different process, and we worked through, and we ended up coming through with a document that was a nice document, but we didn't use it. It wasn't impactful in the classroom, and that was my only critique there. In Brandon, instead of having consultants, I led our strategic planning when I started in Brandon. And the reason I did that is I wanted to make sure that I was part of it, because I got to do a lot of the learning, and I was on the front line of hearing all of that. In Grosse Pointe, we had all these focus groups, and I wasn't in on all these different things. So I wanted to hear from everybody, and it was a chance to connect and talk. So we did a thing, we called it Brandon 2025, a 10-year vision for the district, and it's been very successful. For me, I think the strategic plan is way underappreciated. I think it's the roadmap. I think it's the thing that binds us together as a district. It's a good strategic plan. Particularly when we talk about finances and where you're going to invest your resources, the strategic plan is incredibly important. So I think it's exciting that the new superintendent is going to have a chance to be part of this process. But these are some of the things that I think are really important. First off, the process, that's not a one-person decision. I would want to talk with the board about how would you like it to go? Is it better to have an outside consultant? What is your past experience? Let's talk to a place like Rochester has a great strategic plan. I'd love to talk to Bob Shaner, and maybe we talk to some board members and say, what is it that, what is it that happened in what did you guys do? Who did you use? So I think the process, we could talk about that, but these are some things that I would say have to be part of it. One of the things that I think is missing from most strategic plans are measurable goals. It's one thing to have a statement and say, we're going to do something for everybody. We all agree with that. That's a belief statement. But I think what is really important for a strategic plan to be very effective is that it is measurable, that there's metrics that you can walk through and say, how are we doing? And we could come back and we could say, yes, we're making progress. We're not there yet, but we've made some steps along the way. And then ultimately, were we successful in what our goal was? I believe in less goals than more goals. Sometimes you see it where they're scattershot, and they're like, we want to do everything, and we do. But if you really want to be effective, and if you're a classroom teacher, you should know what the main goals of the district are. In Brandon, we have 3 primary areas that we focus in on, and you ask any teacher, they know what those areas are. Our first one is quality in all that we do. We have a whole bunch of things in there, and then we have measurables in there. So for us, we want to be in the top 25 in the state in all tested areas. So when we come back, we say, how's our progress? And when we report out, we say, this is the progress we've made towards top 25. And we're halfway there. We've got 5 years to do it. Are we making progress? And then I talk with the board, and the board is able to look at it and say, Matt, I see that we're too slow here. We are not on target in this area. And it's meaningful because there are specific measurables within that. So that, I think, is really important. Teaching and learning has got to be the core of what we're doing. I think we have to think about what it is at the end of the day that we want students to leave the Birmingham School District with. Obviously, you have your foundational things. I believe strongly in fundamentals, reading, writing, math, but what is that goal? What does that goal look like? I want every student to leave any school district I'm in as outstanding readers, writing, and mathematicians. Some kids are going to be way beyond others, but everybody's going to be strong on their own learning. I believe that you have to have a well-rounded education. I think that's a great spot for goals, talking about how we make it all, that we develop the whole child, and that has to do with things like character education, which is an amazing thing that you guys have invested in. I'm doing that also in the Brandon School District, but also things like the electives, students being able to find their passion area. And so those are some of the things that would be important to me. Having a lot of constituents involved with that, again, is a really important, and making sure that people's voices are heard and part of developing that plan. But at the end of the day, it has to be very focused and measurable so that we can execute it and it's meaningful for teaching and learning.
Thank you.
I'm wondering how and when you can use the strategic plan as your example, or a different example, how and when you would engage community for input and for assistance. So some specific techniques you'd use to get community input. And then how do you balance the perspectives from members of the community, the constituents, I think is the word you used, versus the K-12 educators? And then the final question is, after all this process is done, you might have a group or two groups of stakeholders who are left feeling like they weren't heard, or are left feeling like they were heard and they were ignored. How do you keep those groups engaged? How do you move forward with that group?
Okay. So I think it's constant communication. And the door has to be open. It's not a once in a while where you open up the door. That doesn't work. You have to have constant communication. Where I'm at now as superintendent, I look for different spots where I can communicate with the public. I have a column in the local paper. Everybody reads the local paper. So I share information that I want everybody to know, and then I give opportunities for people to communicate and talk. I'm involved with all these, the Rotary Club, and the Lions Club is the big thing out in northern Oakland County, and I'm part of the Lions, and I'm constantly talking and getting feedback. So I think it's an ongoing thing. You always have to stay connected. You can't just go to the voters when we're going to have a bond and I'm going to talk to you for the first time in the last 2 years. You have to have those relationships, and they have to be part of what you're doing all along. I'll use an example. When I came to my current school district 5 years ago, we knew that we needed to reduce at least one building. So immediately, I started sharing information about our building capacity and all the things that we would do inside the district, the financials, and I shared it with the entire community. Everybody had that information, and when in 16-17, we finally decided to embrace that discussion, they called it the worst-kept secret in town. I talked about it over and over. I said, there's going to be a day when we have to have this conversation. So nobody was surprised, but we went through a process, and we took our time. We took tons of feedback, had surveys, community forums, all kinds of things along the way. The other thing is that I did a lot of the presenting, and when I work with the board or with the community, I never present one option. I always present multiple options so that people they know that we're not coming and saying, this is the only option, it's this or nothing. That also opens up for people to give feedback, and they say, I really like option B. This really speaks to me. I think that this is a good way to do things. So it invites people into that conversation. But you have to have those ongoing opportunities to do that. For example, but I think you have to be intense. You talked about how do you make sure that everybody's voice is heard. You have to be the one that makes it happen. You've got to be the one that makes sure that communication, that people are heard, that you take time. Again, those forums and things like that are really important. Another thing I did during that time is whenever anybody would ask a question, I would take it, they would email it to me, and I would put it onto an ongoing list of questions so everybody could read what other people had put. So they said, oh, they responded to my question, it's on the website, thank you. And so that was another way. The other thing is that you have to be open to other, if you come in and you're talking to the public and you're saying, I want your feedback, and you've already made your mind up, it's not going to be a good conversation. So giving you an example of the same thing is, we internally, we had decided that one of our buildings was probably the best building to close. And we had overwhelming community support that it would be a different building. And we listened, we walked through it, we heard people's arguments, and we switched our plan, and we did it. And the people came back and said, you mean it. You mean what you say. You said you would listen to us, and you did. Because you wanted to close Fletcher, and you wanted to close Harvey Swanson, and we wanted to close Fletcher. And you did what we asked. So I think that's important, but not everybody's happy. So you're right about that, and I know that was the last question. So you can't stop communicating because people didn't get their way. So I think it's really important, like, for example, we had to outsource busing. That was a really tough thing, and I know that you guys have had to do that here. It's the follow-up, is connecting with the people that maybe were on the other side of that decision, and building relationships with people and not giving up, keeping them involved, finding a way to keep, I know we didn't agree on this thing, but there's all these other things that we do agree on. So does that answer all three?
Yeah, that was great. Just a quick follow-up question. How did, you started this example by saying it was the worst-kept secret because you got out all that financial information. How did you do that? Through your local column, or?
Local columns, I have newsletters that I put out. Again, I'm at all these different meetings, I do presentations for different people, and those are the topics that I would choose. Just all of those things.
Okay.
Staff, my staff newsletters, I give them
Gotcha.
everything. They know, like, my staffing ratios. I do staffing for the district, and they all know exactly what my ratio is, because I want them to know it. So
Okay.
they can look and say, okay, they're projecting 100 student enrollment, that means they're probably going to cut 4 teachers from the district. I want them to know it, because it gives them peace of mind. So all
Okay.
those different forums, that's how I do it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Outlaw, my question is kind of piggybacking on Adrian's about stakeholders. Perhaps you heard that we in Birmingham a year ago adopted this program, this curriculum called Integrated Math using CPM, pardon me. And it was a difficult process. We received some pushback from the community. And I would like to know, how would you have avoided that pushback? And then my second part is, how would you have handled now those stakeholders in our community that were not comfortable with the end result?
Sure. So obviously I wasn't here, so I can't comment on, what the steps were in that. But I would say that some of the, when you're introducing a curriculum that's going to be a big change, it goes back to the stakeholder and having that communication far ahead of time. So I think you have to include parents, you have to include students, and they need to be part of that discussion on the front end as you're vetting some of those things. I think that's an important part of the process, because I think when you're at the table, you're on the ground floor, that your understanding of whatever the change is, the need for it, some of the strengths and weaknesses, you're part of that discovery process. So I would, again, I wasn't here for this, but I think that if you're doing something big like that, you need to be like out in the open. And you need to say, these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, and be super transparent about your investigation of something big like that. Teachers should know it, obviously, but parents shouldn't be surprised that you're making this change, especially if it's something that's a big change. So that's a little bit, that's what I would do with stakeholders. What was the second part of it? I'm sorry.
Well, then I just asked, so that was the rollout then, the way you'd roll it out. And then the program did pass, we implemented it, but we had a certain group in our community that were very unhappy.
Sure.
And so I said, how would you handle that group that was unhappy?
Sure. I think that if you're confident that you made the right decision, I think that's important. If there's a decision that, okay, are you comfortable? Was it the right decision? Do you feel, as the 7 board members, you feel that it was the right decision? That's an important piece. If you do, there's one way you handle it. If on the other side of it, you're wishy-washy, and you're like, you know what, they bring up some really good points, there's another pathway. If it's the first, I think you need to bring people in, and maybe you're doing math nights, and hey, let's come on in here and roll everything back out. Roll the tape back up and say, this was our process, and walk through and be really open about what we investigated. We looked at this one, and this one, and this is why we chose this pathway. And try to back up the tape a little bit and make sure that people kind of know the process to get there. And then if you're wishy-washy on it, I would recommend that you go back and you revisit it and have some more conversation on that. If the concerns are legitimate on it, why would we not take a look and see if there's tweaks to it, or maybe a compromise that might meet the needs of everybody? So those are some of my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So Matt, there are several forms of data. Just looking at your profile and all the information there, you use a lot of data points. And just out of curiosity, we need data. Data is becoming increasingly important in education. And I'm just curious to know, let's say, what are your top 3 data points that you like to use, or types of data that you like to use, and which one do you rely upon the most and why?
That's great. So I have a lot more than 3, because there's like...
I like that.
There is, like, in the financial world, I have very specific things that I'm looking at in the financial side, everything from fund balance to our 5-year projection, all those type of things. But I'm going to talk teaching and learning. Teaching and learning, there's a couple different things. There's a few big points that I'm going to look at here. One that is near and dear to my heart is student growth. And a lot of people, we focus on students that are failing, which is important. But I consider a student to fail if I'm in the 95th percentile at the beginning of the year and I end up in the 85th percentile. I'm still way above average, but we failed that student. So I look at growth, and a lot of what we talk about with our principals, where I'm at now, a lot of our focus and effort is on student growth. Are our students, is every student progressing? Are they meeting their potential? So meeting their potential, that's a big one. And we do these things called student data meetings that we negotiate into our contract in 30 minutes, twice a month. We focus on students and their data, and we look specifically at that measurement. Are our students progressing? And so those have been a game changer for us. So I look at that. I do look at failures, because that, to me, is a red flag. Failure comes in different ways. There's grades, but I'm also concerned about the things that impact grades, like attendance. We had a meeting yesterday. We have a group that we're calling the dropout prevention. We only have a few people that don't make it through, but we're talking a lot about the students that aren't making it in our system. We're learning about who they are, what makes them tick, what's their home life like, what are the things that are leading them to not making it through. So I look at failure, I would say, is probably my second big one. And then I would say that overall district growth. NWA, I feel like, I don't know if you guys use that test here, but NWA is something that gives us a measure of how we're doing as a system. And we look at it school by school and then as a district. And to me, I call this the ground game. That I don't want to have a big spike in scores and then the next year to come back down. I want us to, it's kind of like the stock market, of course, a little bit like that, but I want that general trend to be moving forward. Are we moving forward as a district? Because that gives us evidence that our strategic plan is working. So those are some of the big measures. Those are probably the data points that I look at the most to say, are we doing right by our students?
Can you dive in just a little bit quickly?
Absolutely.
You talked about financial. How do you use your financial data? Because in a district, obviously, there's a business aspect of being in a district, a school district. So how do you use your financial data?
Sure. A lot. I mean, I think it's a huge part of everything. And one of the things, I teach school finance over at Oakland, and one of the things I talk about a lot is that finance is at the core of everything. That if you manage, and I always say this cheesy line at the beginning, but I always talk about, if you do a great job with your finances, I always ask, I say, how many of you are going to be the CFO of your school district? And it's a bunch of crickets. They're all teaching and learning people like me. I'm a teaching and learning person, but this was an area that I looked and said, this is the key. So I say, if you manage the finances, you can open the door to everything you want to do. If you know how to do this, I'm not trying to teach you to be an accountant. But I want you to be smart with money. If you're smart with money, you can invest and do all kinds of great things. So all of the things that we're doing in Brandon academically, there's finances connected with it. So the thing that I do a ton of is connect our investment of resources with our goals academically. And that's kind of, we have a fantastic business person, counts and does all that great stuff. She's brilliant. But my job is to make sure that we're in alignment, that our finances are directly supporting what our mission is as a school district. So that's what I look at a lot. I also believe strongly that it's taxpayer dollars and that we have a responsibility to the taxpayers. So I am very cognizant of that, and I expect everybody in our organization to be. And if we use our resources well, we can do some great things. So that's kind of how I use that.
Did you sit outside in the last interview or the?
Did somebody say the same thing?
All week long.
Always long.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Got it.
Matthew, thank you for being here tonight.
you.
I was just wondering, how do you maintain a good working relationship with the Teachers Association?
Absolutely. So the relationship part is my favorite part of the job. I love that. It's my favorite thing I do every day is connecting and talking with people. I see the EA as being my partner. And I know that there's some places where it's more contentious, but if I were to move forward, I would really encourage you to talk to our EA and talk about what our relationship's like, because we take care of each other, because we're on the same team. And our EA president always gives me heads up. I always give him heads up. I make him look good. He makes us look good. We work together because we have mutual interests. We meet all the time. We have standing meetings that we do every single month, and I meet with the group there. But I go to his classroom and I pop by and say, hey, just want to give you a heads up. This is going on. Or if there's a disciplinary situation, he always knows first. He never gets surprised. And he never lets me get surprised either. So by working together, we've done some really good things. On the financial side, we've worked together a lot. I take care of him. I say, this is what we need to do in order to have successful negotiations. So he doesn't fight me when we make some sort of reductions over here, because they know that we have teachers as a major priority in our district. And so we've worked together on those things. They've been a great partner for us. So does that answer?
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Outlaw, you commented briefly earlier about character work in the district. So in Birmingham, we have this concept of the twin pillars, not just successful academic achievement, but developing the whole child, the character side. And different districts do different things in this character area. We followed the character.org 11 principles framework. If you can talk a little bit about your philosophy around character, what's the role of public education in that arena, and maybe what you've done at Brandon, Grosse Pointe, Novi, in any context, whether it's at a building level or at a district level.
Right. I'm absolutely passionate about character education. I think it's, particularly in this era, I call it the cell phone generation, there's such a need for us to help our students to be successful in the business world. And there's so many things that are needed in that area. So I think it's a great opportunity for us as a district to work on those things. In Brandon, we have done a couple different things. Formed a committee in 15-16, put some of our principals that were really strong, some teachers on that committee that believe in this, and they came up with a couple different pillars here. We have a thing that's called the Black Hawk Code of Conduct. Black Hawk Code of Conduct is simple, it's manners. It's things like Blackhawks look you in the eye when we talk. Blackhawks hold the door for people. Blackhawks say please and thank you. And it's things that we take for granted a little bit, but it's reminding us that that's important. So we have those signs all over our building, and we reinforce those in the buildings. But the program that we've invested in has been the Positivity Project, and it's done in a couple of other districts. I know the Grand Blanc is doing it, but we piloted it at one of our elementary schools. It's at both of our elementary schools this year. Next year, we will add it to the middle school and then to the high school the year after that. And it's very similar to what you're doing. It's all about resilience, and it's all these lessons around character topics, and it's become a really important piece of our puzzle. So passionate about it, and think it's really adding to the experience in Brandon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Dr. Outlaw, I guess the communications that you've talked about and the constant, there's a role for a superintendent relative to public discourse. And could you talk a little bit about how you see the role of a superintendent relative to public discourse in political, legislative, social issues that are, again, in the public discourse at any point in time, and how you communicate about those things in your current role, and I assume going forward.
It's a really important part of the job. This morning, I was in Lansing with the Tri-County Alliance we're talking about lame duck politics and things like that. So it's an important role. Anybody who has this role, obviously, is gonna be really involved with that. These are some of the things I think are really important. This role is not a partisan politics job. This is a politically neutral position. The party that I'm in currently, I'm in the Brandon Student Party. If I were hired here, I'd be in the Birmingham Student Party, and I'm going to advocate and fight for whatever's best for Birmingham students. I know that sounds cliche, but I think sometimes we lose sight, and people end up representing their own beliefs as opposed to the beliefs of the community. So I really feel like I am your employee if I were hired here at the school board. And I have to represent the community and what the community's wishes are in the political arena. Some of the strategies that I use with the legislators, I'm very respectful. I know that sounds like an automatic, but that's not always the case. I'm nonpartisan, I don't judge, and I really focus in. I feel like you have so much airtime, and people are busy, that when I speak, I'm very quick to the point. I get to the things that really matter for our kids. This morning, I had a couple different points. We were talking about the A to F grading, and I said, you've changed the policy every single year. Can we focus on one so that we can follow through and deliver for our families? They said, we had that conversation. But I know that's a really important piece to the puzzle. There are other topics that are really important that you need to have public discourse on. And when those issues arise, or if you could be proactive on some of those issues, I think it's great to have conversations about things like diversity and race and things that are impactful to the experience of the students here in the school district. So I think having that kind of dialogue and being really open and honest about it, I think it's an important part of being a superintendent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to talk to you a little bit about race, and in particular, the achievement gap that our students of color experience here. I don't know the data in Brandon. But what I want to know is, when you're faced with these notable differences in growth or in just absolute data, for students of color, for students with special needs, what's been your approach? If you have a success story, please share. And then what do you consider to be innovative in this area? Something you'd like to try, something you've heard about in your research that's successful? Yeah.
My most similar experience, it was in Grosse Pointe, where we had larger gaps that we needed to close. So a lot of my experience has been there, but we're also doing the same thing in the Brandon School District. I guess before I would say what I've done, one of the things that you want to be careful with the achievement gap is that it's your approach to it. I think it's really important. I think you have to work really hard to bring the bottom up, but you can't do it at the expense of the top. And what sometimes you see a regression to the mean on certain issues. So for me, when I look at closing achievement gaps, it has to be everybody's progressing, and then you're bringing these others up at a quicker rate. That's how we have to close the achievement gap. So that's how I visualize it. Some of the things that I've done in the different school districts that I've been in Grosse Pointe and in Brandon, we've had freshman assist program, which focused on academic support as well as affective support. Double block math and English classes. We've done, we had the 100 Club when I was at Grosse Pointe North. When I was at Grosse Pointe South, as principal, we formed a program called the Success Program, which worked really well, and we identified the students that were most at need, the students that needed the most support, and we worked in teams of 5, and we had individualized attention, connecting with parents, and we gave extra help and support to help those students be successful. In Brandon, I would say that probably the most innovative thing that we've done, I mentioned it was the student data meeting. It's specifically targeting students that are behind. And every student is different, so it's hard to paint a wide brush and say,
Right.
we have a large group of students and this one strategy is going to work for everybody. The truth is that I have 2 kids in my house, and they're both completely different, and they are different strategies for just my 2 kids. So for me, what's really important is that you focus on the individual growth of every child. What is it that makes them tick? What are the things that are holding them back? And if you focus on the individual, good things are going to happen. So those are some of the things. The data meeting, I think, is probably the most innovative. Those 30-minute meetings, our teachers know more about our students than I think they ever have in our school district.
And just a follow-up, do you think that that strategy is attainable in a district that's much larger than Brandon?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have more teachers. Teachers, it's about teachers knowing their students. And Brandon, the teachers have the same number of students than, that you have
Sure.
here in Birmingham, so. So absolutely attainable.
Great, thank you.
I would say the system is really important. That data meeting that we have, it built it in and guaranteed that we do that. So
Right.
you can't expect people to do it on their own time and it to be systematic. That you have to build a system in to guarantee that the good work is done.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned it was built into the contract, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I negotiated that last year.
Used to have those meetings, the student.
Yeah, that's right. We do. We here in Birmingham, we put out a climate survey, and it indicated that the trust in district leadership is a concern for stakeholders. How would you go about reestablishing that trust and creating a more collaborative environment?
So I think visibility is the key to building relationships and building trust. If you're in the central office building, all the time, people don't know you, and they don't trust you. When they see something from you, they're almost scared when you come in the building. So I think you have to have regular presence in the building is a really important thing. Rich Mashesky is superintendent in Troy, and when he got the job there, he made all of his central administrators go to a building, a certain number of buildings every week, and they have to report at it at their meeting. I would do that exact same thing here. I think it's the fun part of the job, too. And when I talked to him about it, a couple of years ago, he talked about it and said it's great because, people, they go and they enjoy it and they know more about it. People know who they are. So that's one of the things. I think visibility is really important. I think setting the expectation to make sure we take time, that it's okay to take time for relationship. We need to build relationships. So it's an overall culture inside of a district. But I think it starts with visibility. You've got to get out there and get in the classrooms, get in the buildings. If you do that, I think good things are going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks.
So BPS has some pretty exceptional staff and educators within our district, and most of them are considered thought leaders, whether it's throughout the state or the nation, and they've been recognized. We've had, Teacher of the Year. We've had a number of different accolades that have been given to our educators here. Tell me how you plan to cultivate these thought leaders, and if you can, talk about the management style to achieve that.
So I take great pride in trying to get the most out of the people that work on our teams. And I think that it doesn't just happen. If teachers are just in their classrooms and you don't pull them out and bring them into the conversation about education, you're going to miss out on a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent out there. And so some of the things that I've done when I was in Grosse Pointe and here is, as you're meeting and learning about people, is finding out what their strengths and weaknesses are, what are their passion areas, and really connecting and feeling like you're part of their development, their pathway. So what I do, I can think of a couple teachers right off the bat. I know that they want to be administrators. Well, I pull them in and say, could you lead this? This is a great way for you to, come in and really contribute to the district. What they can grow, and we can access their talent, So those are some of the things. I think the individual growth. I think having regular opportunities for collaboration is really important. You talk about thought leaders. I think one of the things behind that is that they're out there. They're collaborating with other school districts, and they're learning from other school districts. In Grosse Pointe and in Brandon, I've done a lot where teachers have been out and have done building tours and have met with colleagues. Our music department they've got a new kind of PLC where they're meeting with all these different people. They get out there and they learn and they share. So you have to be willing to do that. Those are some of the things, but I think you have to make it happen. And again, it goes back to systems. If you want your teachers to collaborate and be part of it, I'm not sure if you have PLCs or common planning time, capitalizing on that and protecting that time where teachers can be thought leaders, I think is really important too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Outlaw, sometimes we fall short of our goals. Could you give us an example of maybe in your administration where maybe you fell a little short, and how did you react to that? How did you handle that situation?
Well, the word failure is not in my vocabulary because failure only happens when you quit. And the truth of the matter is, I talked about that stock market analogy. You're going to have these spikes and you're going to have ups and downs. I'll use my daughter, for example. She's in 3rd grade. And she had a great September, and then in October she went flat, and then in November it slid back like this. Now, that's education. That's the beauty of it. So I would say one for me is, I would say one of my frustrations is that I want our student success to be improving at a faster rate. But our strategic plan is 2025. It's not this minute. So I have to reel it back in and say, okay, we're going to have growth and we're going to go up and down. And in 3rd grade, how in the world did we slide backwards a little bit? Well, let's get in and let's talk about it and let's work on it. We're still headed in the right direction. So I would say test scores has been one example where I would call me impatient, and I'm working hard at that. But I would say that's one where I would like to see more progress quicker. Just because, and I always say, this is the only year Hannah Outlaw gets to be in 3rd grade. She doesn't have another year. We've got to knock it out of the park for her. So there's that urgency, I think, in our profession. So,
Thank you.
sure, thanks.
Good, time-wise?
Yes, yes. Doing very well.
Round 3. Looking through the equity lens, we talked a little bit about the gap issues and what we do to identify students that need help and innovative programs to help them. This board will get cards and letters on that topic regularly, but we're equally likely to get cards and letters for gifted and talented programming, right? Common thread, meet children where they're at, stretch them, right? Put your shoes, and again, looking back over Novi, Grosse Pointe, Brandon, put your shoes now in the Birmingham superintendent seat. What do you push on when you get here? How do you balance those needs? Are they in conflict? Can they work together? We have a lot of resources here, great teachers, a lot of money, but not limitless, right?
Yep.
New superintendent, how do you think about balancing those needs? How do you communicate that to a community that seemingly wants everything all the time?
Absolutely. So I think it comes back to the commitment to the growth of each and every child. If we have students at our high schools that come to 9th grade and they're beyond anything that we can provide. They're so smart, they're so brilliant. So we have to find a way to challenge those students. So can you have both? 100% you can. I think you can have students that are passionate about career technical education. We have students that are passionate about music and performing arts. We have students that are passionate about foreign language. We have students that are focused on engineering and whatnot. We have kids all over the spectrum, just like we do in the real world. So can you do it? Absolutely. And you can have, the key with the equity piece is equity of opportunity. So have you given students the requisite skills to access those programs? And so if I need to be successful in an engineering program and it's super exclusive and it's a great program and I want to be an engineer but I'm a mediocre student, that doesn't sit well. How can we find a pathway so that I can pursue my passion in engineering without being excluded? So I think there's a balance between those two things. So I would say equity of access is really important, but as far as having programming, you have to have programming to meet the needs of kids all over the spectrum. In Brandon, I always talk about that we cannot have any ceilings for kids. We got to get out of their way and let them soar. And for us, that's a really important piece. So that means that we have to be nimble. Every year we have to do different things. We have to be looking at students that are way ahead of the curve and see what we can do to challenge them. Starting in 15, 16, I led a group, we call it the Accelerated Learning Initiative. We need to do a better job of helping those students that were above grade level be challenged, that they had rigorous learning every day. So we have done a number of things there to help push those students forward and to lift the ceiling off for those students. So yes, absolutely. we can do
During
it.
the school day, after the school day, some of those examples around where you've helped those kids, how have you attacked that?
So we have 5 big pillars. We have, our first one is we created a pathway to be successful in the AP Lit and Lang in high school, and we aligned all of our honors ELA classes so that those were aligned. Second one was we created an honors math sequence that began in 4th grade that was a natural sequence to Algebra 1, where we didn't have catch-up years and things. Those still exist, but we wanted a natural sequence where students would do 1 year in 1 year because they were already ahead of the game. So we worked on that quite a bit. We do some creative grouping within classrooms with differentiation to help with that. We're doing enrichment activities. We've done everything from during the day things like extending language down all the way down to 3rd grade. Project Lead the Way. We have engineering K-5 and now 6-8. STEM Academy at the high school. So those are during the day. Community education. We relaunched community education in 16-17. We have all kinds of things from chess and neat things that are going to challenge kids just to use their brains. So a little bit of everything. And then I guess our last pillar is to get rid of structural barriers that prevent students from reaching their potential. And unfortunately, we're bureaucratic institutions, so we want to be really focused on making sure that bureaucracy never gets in the way of a student. So those are some of the things that we've done.
So when you start early like that, 3rd, 4th grade, it's great, but you have to create then on-ramps. What about the child who finds their passion a little bit later than another child? How does that work?
We do. We have on-ramps. We have on-ramps for students to get into those sequences. In the ELA area, it's easier to on-ramp on because ELA is more about depth and the depth of reading. It's an easier transition. In math, it's a curriculum where the students in 4th grade are doing 5th grade curriculum. So we have opportunities for catch-up years, and that's how students can on-ramp into it if they want to join.
Slower to
late.
come along. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, sure, thanks.
Okay, next one, Dr. Outlaw, regarding, you've made reference a few times to when we talked about the strategic plan and curriculum and some of the goal setting on very specific things, that it's not a straight line curve as much as we love all of it to be that way. There are the ups and downs. Could you talk a little bit about how you deal with communication and transparency to the community when performance is not where it should be, or there's an instance of something that's not in alignment with the values and the character of the district and the community?
Transparency is not selective. I think you have to be able to, if you're going to be truly open and honest with your public, you have to be willing to share the good as well as the bad. And so we don't hide those things, and I think that's an important part of building trust with the community. When you say, you know what, we came up a little short on our scores this year. We're 2025 is our target, but this year we slid backwards in 3rd grade ELA. Let's talk about it. We're solution oriented. It's okay. It's not okay that we don't meet our goals, but it's okay to talk to the public about it and say, okay, we're working on this. This is what we're learning about this. But I think the being open and honest is a really important part of it. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And as a school system, I think that if you present yourself as perfect, I think it closes people off from giving feedback. So you have to be open and honest. Did that answer that?
It does. And you talked about a lot of tools that you use for communication, such as, I think you mentioned a column, right? So would you use all of those channels in communicating something that is a disappointment, whatever it might be?
Maybe, probably the column in the paper is, it's a little bit more marketing oftentimes, and I tell stories about like homecoming, and I'll figure out the history of Brandon, it started in 2025 or 2000 or 1925 and whatever it might be. So I tell a lot of stories and things about the school district. But so that might not be the venue for it, but I share a lot of raw data. So like in my parent newsletters, I use this platform called MailChimp, and you could link all kinds of articles and things in there. So some people just want to breeze through things, and I do a lot of bullet points. So somebody can just pick up their phone and go, scroll through it and see the key points, but others, there's links to the raw data. So by sharing raw data, that's a way to be transparent. Doesn't mean that I have to shout from the mountaintops that third grade ELA, here's our scores. People are smart. They can look at it and say, this is where we're at.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of want to dive in a little further to Steve's question, and I'm wondering what role you see third parties playing in achieving the best possible outcomes for all students. And by third parties, I mean anything from, a neighborhood nonprofit to possible internships, apprenticeships, things like that, for both students who want to take an alternative route, they don't want to go to college, or for students who see it as an opportunity to really hone in on something they'll then use in college.
So I think it's an untapped resource, and I think that we need to do a better job in that as a system completely. One of the things that I think I would jump in and I would be aggressive in that area. I think the external support is fantastic. One of the things that we've been working a lot where I'm at now is about career readiness and career awareness. So we're designing a course right now, a senior capstone, and part of that we want our students to do internships where they're going out and being in the field. It's one thing to go and do a test and say, Matt, you should go and be a superintendent someday. And there's another one where you go out and you actually walk around with Dr. Neerad, and you're walking around and you're like, this is what the job's like. Oh my gosh, I love this, or it's connection. So we're trying to get people out in the field on the awareness side of it. In the career technical area in particular, there is a huge need. This is an area that's just exploding. So I've been in a lot of conversations with Oakland schools and also some other areas about getting some of our students that are interested in the non-traditional pathway, the non-college pathway, of getting them connected more with the opportunity to go out and be in the field and work, apprenticeships. We've not landed on that completely in Brandon, but through the OTC at Clarkston, where we send our students, they're doing a marvelous job with that. So I would say all hands on deck. Any opportunities that we can bring to students, the better.
And do you see those tech opportunities like at OTC as more or less exclusively for what you call non-traditional routes, or do you see that as a possible college preparatory situation as well?
It can absolutely be college preparatory. I think the old way of looking at that, those are the kids that can't make it.
Right.
Those are very lucrative careers. Those are very high demand areas. And a student that, say, I'm interested in engineering, there's some incredible CTE things that you can do on your pathway that are going to put you way ahead of everybody else. All the hands-on building of robots, all these things. I mean, that's unbelievable advantage that you would have going into pursue engineering, for example.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was thinking, there's always like a certain degree of angst that comes with change. And whether this change is affecting parents or students or staff, how do you see yourself balancing that change with these groups?
So, change is,
Well, you know what I should have said? I apologize.
Oh, no.
I should have added, like, balancing the need for organizational growth, the need for systematic consistency, and then balancing it with those groups I mentioned.
So change can be scary, and for good reasons. I really think, especially when things are going well, it's hard to change and hard to modify when things are going well in certain areas. I'm going to go back to this strategic plan about how important that is. The strategic plan is where your change should be coming from, because you've agreed on it, and you've agreed on it with all these stakeholders. When you're constantly changing everything, it creates instability in an organization. And when it's not part of a focused effort, when people say, you know what, they're changing this because the district's goal is this, and this is going to be the measurable, they're more comfortable with it. But when things out of the blue, we're going to change the performing arts program, and we're going to change this, and we're going to switch to Positivity Project for character education. And people are like, how does this fit in the master plan? So I think that people feel more comfortable with change when they understand where the big picture, how it fits in that big picture. So I think that's really important. And then I also think that that communication piece is really important. I always talk about ground floor. We talked about the EA, or the Teachers Association. The Teachers Association, I want them on the ground floor when we start budget. Every year when we start the budget, we do our work at the building level, and I talk with them, and I share things with them because they're on the ground floor in it. So if we're making a change or things like that, they're not surprised. It's the same thing with everybody. I think when people are on the ground floor and they understand the data, the compelling reason for things, I think people are more open to change. So, but the big one is it's got to be part of a larger master plan.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't really have any other questions. And that's rare for me.
It might be a first.
That is, that's right.
I know.
Wow.
I know, mark this day. So, yeah.
That's all right.
I don't have any other questions. They've been answered.
Just one last one, I guess. You kind of explain your philosophy dealing with the board, how you deal with the board, and maybe how you keep the board updated between meetings?
Yeah. So, after being superintendent for 5 years, this is, I feel like the experience here is good, is a good asset here. The board, to me, they're my partner. I'm their partner. I'm their guy. You know, they're my people. We're together, and we're in constant communication. Some of the things that are really important is that I've seen a lot of places where the superintendents forget the fact that they work for the board, and I never forget that. I work for the board, and the board works for the community. So I have a role. I'm a representative. It's not about me. It's about the whole community and district. So I think it's an important thing to remind yourself of. But working with the board is I do newsletters I do updates like every Friday, and in it, I'm always previewing things that are coming. So I'll talk about data. Let's say if we're going to have a conversation about budget. Well, I'll give them some teaser things early on as we're developing. We're not done with our work yet, but we're still working on it, but these are some of the things that are coming so that the board is not surprised 3 weeks later. So those are always formal. I'm constantly in conversation. I have my time. I talk with the board president on the way to work. We drive in at the exact same time. She calls me, and she says, how's everything going? We chit-chat about family and things like that, but we just keep tabs. I have another board member that calls me every day on the way home, or we have lunch together. So every board member, it depends on what your schedules are and your needs and things like that, but I always have that one-to-one is a really important piece to the puzzle. I do a lot of texting of things that are not essential. An ambulance just pulled up to the high school. I text the board. The board knows immediately. The administrator's supposed to call me. We have a student that's having a seizure. They're okay. Send it out to the board. Somebody calls the board up and says, I saw there was an ambulance out in front of the high school. You say, yeah, there was a kid with a seizure. It's good. You know what that is. And you're at work. You don't have time to take a long conversation, but you can take a glance at it and know that something's going on. So I do text quite a bit on those little updates. I try to not overwhelm the board. Everybody on the board has jobs, has families, has responsibilities. So I try to be really cognizant of time. If we're going to have good board members, you can't have meetings that are 4 hours long. You can't be inefficient. So I work really hard to make sure all of our work is very efficient, that the board is very well educated, and that they have all the information, they have their questions answered. And when we come to the board meeting, that people are ready. And that's my responsibility. So those are some of the strategies that I use. I protect the board. I take a lot of bullets to make sure that they don't get here. They do the same for the administration, and it's a nice team approach.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to reverse, if you don't mind, and take Jessica's opportunity for another question.
I want it back, never mind.
So district diversity, in our district, diversity means, I guess, many different things to different people. And I'd like to ask what diversity means to you. And Describe your experience with diversity and inclusion in your previous district, and also the district climate survey that I mentioned earlier indicated that achievement and opportunity gap is a significant concern to stakeholders here at BPS. And I wondered, how will you measure and close those opportunity gaps? I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit,
Absolutely.
I hear.
Answer the first part first. I think focusing on the individual student, each student is unique. So when I think of diversity, everybody, I talked about my own kids. My kids are different. And there are, so to me, diversity is embracing the fact that everybody is different, we have different backgrounds, there's different culture, we have different personalities, we have different skill sets. And I think having a climate where you're open to the differences, I think is really important. For me, within diversity from the school district, obviously I have great respect for what Birmingham does. You guys are a leader in that area, and you've been very aggressive, and the work that Dr. Hitchcock is doing is fabulous, and if I were hired, I would want to stay out of her way and support her in any way I can to continue that work. That would be my approach. To me, some of the things that are important from a school system in this area, one is about the culture, the climate, and where students can feel comfortable being here, that we're open, and that just creates an optimal learning environment. So I think the environment is really important. Second big area is about the curriculum side of things, is having a diverse curriculum where you're coming at things from multiple perspectives. And again, talking about that relevance thing I said earlier on, that books and things are relevant, and students are passionate about what they're reading. So I think that diversity curriculum is important, and I also think that diversity in your staffing is really important. I think that that's something that you have to be intentional about. So that would be another thing that would be a focus area for me. But as far as experience with diversity, every place has diversity. And I've been, I would say I've been honored to be in diverse environments, diverse language-wise. You know, Spanish is one of my areas, and I love to travel the world and be part of other cultures and learn about other people and backgrounds. And it's amazing. I went to China in 2013. It was like eye-opening. It was amazing learning about how the families work in China and how they support education. And so I've had lots of different experience, obviously, in school. Really connected with Wayne State. I'm on the Board of Visitors at Wayne State, and a big part of the reason I'm stay so connected is because there's more racial diversity at Wayne State, and Brandon is a little bit more white than, so I really stay connected with Wayne State because I think it's important to have a lot of different perspectives. So those are some of my experiences along the way.
That's my alma mater, too, Wayne
all
State,
right,
yep.
There you go. Go Tartars, though.
Oh, yeah.
Tartars, now Warriors, but.
Okay, trustees, the time is winding down, so I will ask any follow-up, any outlying questions that we have for Dr. Outlaw.
I know it's getting late. We appreciate your,
Thank you for being
Sticking
here.
with us.
This is day 3 for you, so.
yeah, no, it's very helpful. You talked at the top about how teaching and learning is at the heart of what we do, which is another way of saying we're a professional services organization.
Right.
And so evaluating employees, teachers, is a part of that process. Set the statutory part aside, right, which is understood, and that's something you have to play to. But what's your philosophy, your approach to evaluating teachers? How has that worked for you? What's been your personal role? If you come to Birmingham, what would you bring to the party in that whole area of evaluating teaching and learning?
So I'm pretty passionate about this because I think the approach to teacher evaluation has huge implications for your culture in your school system. I think that evaluation could be a thing that divides administration and your teachers, or it can be the thing that binds you together. So what I do, and what I did in Grosse Pointe, but now what I do systematically in Brandon, is I have our teachers really focus in on the teachers that are struggling, and we set them in a separate category where we're doing things that we may not renew that teacher. That's a separate category. We focus in, we identify those people early on. That's a different group that may need a different level of intervention, and if the intervention doesn't work, we need to work with our attorneys and transition them out of our district. That's a very small group of people. For the other 98% of your teachers in your school district, it needs to be a coaching and growth model. Everything is about how can we help you get better every day. And something that's important, and Brandon and I talk a lot about, we all have to, the difference between somebody who's good at something and somebody who's okay at something is the intensity of reflection. Those people that are spectacular at anything are the people that constantly reflect. So what I want is our teachers to, in a safe way, be able to look at their practice and look and say, you know, I had a good lesson, but if I tweak this, it could be great. I want our teachers to be able to talk with a colleague and say, can you stop over and watch this thing? I'm testing it out, and feel safe to do that, to learn and to grow. But the teacher has to be the key person in that. The administrator or the coaches and people that work with them, they need to be facilitating that work that the individual teacher is going to do. So that's my approach. It's all about coaching and growth.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Trustees, anything else? Okay, with that, Dr. Outlaw, any closing remarks?
I just want to thank you so much for having me here. It's a real honor. I have incredible respect for this community, incredible respect for this school district, and it would be an absolute honor to have a chance to be part of this team. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for coming.
Thank you, thank you.
All right.
Hello. Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn the meeting. And as I said yesterday, and as I said Monday, we will see you tomorrow.